Hello everyone, my name is Dwayne Allen. The title of my speech today was taken after a Toby Keith song entitled I Want to Talk About Me. Everyone has a story about who they are, and I would like to share that story with you today. I will talk about where I grew up, my enlistment in the Air Force, my first duty station, the places I've been stationed, my family, and finish up with my future plans. So let's begin with the beginning, where I grew up and how I started in the Air Force. I was born in 1970, yes, I am 40 years old, and raised in Floyd County, Virginia. I graduated high school from Floyd County High in 1988 and enlisted in the Air Force in September of that same year. In September, I was off to that dreaded 6 weeks of basic military training at Lackland Air Force Base, Texas. But after basic training, I stayed at Lackland Air Force Base for my tech school where I became an Air Force security policeman. Now that you know where it all began, let's move on to my first duty station at Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota. I arrived at Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota, just outside Rapid City in February of 1989. The day I arrived, it was 50 below zero with wind chill. Talk about a change from being in Virginia and being in Texas for several months. I quickly adjusted to the weather, though, and to my new squadron of fellow security police members. I worked missile security for 4 years there, and it was also the place where I met my wife, Lisa, now my wife of 17 years. Now that I have talked about my first duty station and how my family was started, let's move on to my next stop in my life, Aviano, Italy, where my life was going to drastically change. I arrived at Aviano Air Base in May of 1993. The weather was much, much nicer than it was when I first arrived at Ellsworth, I can tell you that. My job changed from the first time that I found myself working at a weapons storage area. Though the job was a big change, the biggest change came in July of 94 with the birth of my first daughter, Christina. Italy was a fun time and changed my life with the addition of the new family member, but as things are what they are in the military after 4 years, it was time to move on. We have talked about my first two assignments so far, but as I've mentioned, the military career goes, things change, and it was time for the three of us to move off to F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I arrived at F.E. Warren, Cheyenne, Wyoming in July of 1997. I quickly learned that I was going right back to some familiar territory working as security in the missile field. But after my first year there, it was time to change once again with a new family member and the birth of my second daughter, Jennifer, in August of 98. Even though the area was great, the job was good, and everything was going well, wife and I sat down and talked and decided that it was time for another change and hopefully move back to Ellsworth Air Force Base. Well, in early 2001, I was given that chance with what is known as Base of Preference program to move back. Like I said, after discussion, the decision was made, and we moved back to Ellsworth Air Force Base to be close to her family and where we wanted to be for my retirement. So in September of 2001, we found ourselves right back where I started at Ellsworth Air Force Base. Since being back at Ellsworth, I bought a home and deployed a total of 5 times to 5 different locations. I've been deployed to Iraq twice, Saudi Arabia twice, where I am at right now, and the United Arab Emirates. So with all these deployments and loving the area where we all started, this is where I've decided to call home for the rest of my time and retire here at Rapid City. I have briefly talked about where I grew up in Virginia and some of the wonderful places I've been stationed and deployed from South Dakota, Italy, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq a couple of times. And hopefully back to my final base at Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota. You have learned a little about what I did as a job at these locations and my wonderful family and how they grew to include my two great daughters along the way. Finally, I talked about my last duty station back at Ellsworth and how I settled down with buying a home and my plans on retiring there. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about me and the places I have been and my family. Thank you.